Hello, this is AstrologerCoach Sonja Francis, and today we're going to be talking about the upcoming new moon that will be exact on November 7th at 11:02 a.m. East Coast time in the US, which is also New York time, and 4:02 p.m. London time. Now, this new moon will align in 15 degrees of Scorpio, and so this is a new beginning of a moon cycle, and this new moon is in a passionate sign and a sign that tends to go to the extremes. It's sort of like yes or no, all or nothing. So it brings also our focus to our intimate relationships and deepest emotional desires that we have or that we carry. So because the new moon is usually an introverted time where we go within to learn what we wish to align ourselves with for the next 28 days, we will talk a little bit about setting intentions for the new moon cycle and the best time to do so towards the end of this video. So stay tuned for that. But first, we want to talk a little bit about what this new moon is all about. Now, we do have several 29-degree positions, which is an exalted degree because it's the last degree of each sign before it moves into a new sign. We have several of those degrees in this new moon chart. And so this signals lots of shifts and changes for the next 28 days. And so as best as you can, stay centered in the here and now, get ready for the new, and pay attention to anything that might signify a turning point in your life. Now, Scorpio is the second water sign of the zodiac. The first one is Cancer. So it deals with not only the depth of our own psyche, but also the ecstasy and the trauma of relationships. So the extremes, right, in a sense. And so with Jupiter in the last degree of Scorpio right now, at the time of the new moon especially, so we're powerfully reminded to complete our journey of facing our fears, embracing our shadow parts, and reclaiming our inner power. So this is sort of like a journey that's ending. It's been going on for a year. And just to understand a little bit what the shadow is about, because Scorpio has a lot to do with our shadow parts and wanting to integrate these parts of ourselves. The shadow is all about the suppressed, denied, or underdeveloped qualities inside of ourselves. And so when we have not yet fully integrated these own aspects, we usually tend to feel more disempowered, and we feel a little bit more vulnerable to manipulation and domination through other people. And so the other thing about the shadow is that when we reject something about ourselves, we either project that same thing onto other people, onto the outside world, or we can experience explosions with others or implosions within ourselves. So anything that gets suppressed or rejected has a lot of power in us. And so there's what you could say is that which we disown owns us because it has so much power. And what we resist persists, right? When we're resisting something that we don't want to integrate, it just stays there. And it's almost like Scorpio is also considered sort of like a frozen water sign, because when something's not being integrated, that energy freezes. It's like it becomes sort of like it doesn't move. And so it stays there, and it becomes the part in us that can really disempower us. So here are some questions that can help you reclaim any kind of projections that you're doing onto other people. And also maybe just investigating, what is my shadow? What is it that I am disowning, or what is it that I'm not fully wanting to integrate about myself? So questions you can ask yourself are, who really bothers me out there in the world? And that's a great question, right? Who do I love to hate? Because a lot of times these people will hold a shadow part of ourselves that we're not wanting to integrate, that we're not wanting to connect with ourselves. And so one thing that you want to kind of ask yourself as well here is, what specifically bothers you about that particular person, right? Because it's not necessarily that the whole person bothers us, although of course that can be the case too. But there's something specifically, like a characteristic that we might not want to be with, or that we might not be able to get comfortable with another person. And so that particular characteristic that we want to get to understand, right? And how do these characteristics that we love to hate in that other person, how does that relate to me, my upbringing? How does it relate to things that I've pushed away inside of me? Just see what the relationship might be to you. And if you were able to turn down the volume on those characteristics, right? So, because what happens very often when we do project something out into the world, we tend to see the extreme version that is shown back to us, so that we pay attention. But if we take that extreme version, that extreme energy, and we turn down the volume a little bit, or we turn up the volume if it's like an extreme low energy, right? Or we turn up the volume. What might a healthy expression of this energy feel like, right? And so we really want to kind of investigate that a little bit, to play with that and see, where are the component of like, okay, because Scorpio thinks very extreme and thinks very black and white. If we look at that black and white version, and we start to kind of bring it a little bit more into a gray zone where we can mix the black and the white together and see, okay, what does that feel like if it's not so extreme? That can be a really great way of integrating an energy that we may have felt not so comfortable with. And then some other questions you can ask yourself too is like, who do I admire and why? Because people that we admire can also hold a shadow part of ourselves, right? Don't forget, like when we suppress something, we're not just suppressing the negative version of something, we're suppressing all of it, because energy is dense and light at the same time, right? So when we're suppressing something that is dense, we're also suppressing the light version of that same energy. So sometimes people that we admire also hold a shadow for us, the lighter version of that shadow, right? So who do I admire and why? And what scares me most about myself? And that might be a little bit more of a, intimate question to ask yourself, that you might want to maybe journal on, to just see like, what are some parts of yourself that scare you? And that you try to keep under wrap because they scare you in some way. It could be something where you feel like you being too vulnerable. That can scare us sometimes, right? Or it could be something where we are scared of our own anger or our own rage, right? It could be that too. So there's different things that can really scare us about ourselves, or our own light. Being really a light or a beacon, can scare us too sometimes. So it doesn't have to be something predictable, right? But just something that you really like, just be honest with yourself and see, what comes up when you ask yourself, what scares me most about myself? And what reoccurring, uncomfortable or scary dreams or daydreams do I have? And so that's something that can really show us our shadow as well, right? So when we go into dream states, or again, it can be daydreaming as well, that can sometimes be a sort of like a flag, or can show us the direction of where something hasn't been fully integrated, that still needs a voice, something that still needs a voice within us. And so last question is, what do I love to joke about that feels just a little uncomfortable? So, and that's a great one to kind of investigate, because, our jokes can definitely also hold our shadow sometimes, right? So noticing our own desires, our own fears, our own sense of humor can be sort of like, can show us how the shadow makes itself visible inside of us. And so again, you may want to, journal on this or meditate on this for the next 28 days and just see what comes up for you. It's just so you have a little bit more of a conscious approach to your own shadow, because the shadow is definitely something that very often can stay very unconscious, and that's why Scorpio also deals with the unconscious. Now, if you want to have access to the new moon questions from this video via my weekly forecasts, and also the members only full moon videos that I record every month, right around the time of the full moon, a little bit like a week before the full moon, stay tuned. I will talk a little bit more about memberships towards the end of this video, and then you'll be able to have access to all of this. Now, back to the new moon. The spiritual task of Scorpio is to learn to let go of whatever is dead or toxic in our lives at this time. And it doesn't mean that it's always been dead and toxic. It could be that in the past it wasn't, but that in the past we were clinging to behaviors, or we were doing things that worked at the time because we needed them. But over time, we have now discovered that these behaviors are no longer needed, that they're just there because we think we still need to hold on to these behaviors. But they're really already dead, and they're already actually creating toxicity in our lives because they're no longer needed. So often this is connected to past traumas, fears that are based either on what was or on a possible future in which we think we're not going to be okay. So all this can be scary and can stir up wanting control in us. And so the survival brain really thinks that control gives us power and certainty and stability. But of course, that's usually an illusion that's based, in our fears. And so when we're capable of allowing ourselves to look at the fears and bring more consciousness and more light to what it is that we're scared about, if we can talk about it, if we can bring it up into the conscious, if we can bring it up into the light, that's when we can start to release and let go of some of these behaviors and some of these things that are toxic and no longer required in our lives. Now, remember that fear is resistance to life, whereas love is acceptance of life and all its forms. So it's very important that we understand that distinction, because when we're in fear or when we're in survival, we're literally resisting life or part of life. We may not be resisting all of life, but there's certain parts that we might be resisting. Something inside of us, something outside of ourselves, something with another person, in a relationship. So we want to really understand, that we're doing that, because once we are conscious of that we're resisting something, we can start to take our power back, because resistance actually disempowers us. Because it keeps us separate from life. It keeps us separate from others. It keeps us separate from ourselves. And love, which is the opposite of fear, is accepting, embracing, connecting, right? It brings us together with ourselves, with other people, with life. Now, what you can ask yourself here is my thinking and my feeling based on what's actually here now, or is it connected to my history, or to my possible future scenarios that have not yet happened, by the way, right? You have to remember that whenever we think about the future, we are thinking about something that has not yet happened and that we are speculating is might or might not happen. We can never be 100% sure that the future actually happens the way we think it will happen, especially when it's connected to something fearful. So take a moment to set aside memory, and then set aside imaginary futures and concepts. And when you set memory and concepts aside, what is true for you right here, right now? And really take a look at that. Try not to go into an intellectual place with this, but actually really look. If you set memory and if you set concepts or future imaginations aside, what is true for you right here, right now? Because our mind is so good at, our survival mind, right, is so good at wanting to protect ourselves from something that has happened in the past, not wanting it to happen in the future, kind of like analyzing things so it can protect us from, these things. And so it tends to go back and forward between memory and between future imaginary scenarios. And so we want to observe that, because that's not actually empowering to us. That is actually disempowering, because what we're doing is we're not present. We're not present in the here and now, and we're not connected to what's actually empowering to us right here, right now. So really take your time with these questions, and really maybe write them down and really intimately connect with these questions in a real sense. Now, the key to realizing that letting go is not about loss, but about transformation, and ultimately about feeling empowered. Since we're ending something, and that means we're also beginning something new. Whenever you let go, you're letting go of something which is an ending of that particular energy, but you're also bringing something new in. And so that, a letting go is always, it's like breathing in, breathing out, right? Like with every breath that you breathe out, a new breath also comes in. And it's the same with letting go. Whenever we let go, we're letting something new come in. We're allowing, when we're closing a door, there's a window that opens, right? Or if we're closing a window, there's a door that opens. So it's always sort of like a synchronicity of coming and going and completing something, and a new seed sprouting at the same time. So, of course, another thing that plays a huge role with Scorpio is trust. Scorpio has a really hard time with trust. And the reason why it's hard to trust very often with Scorpio has to do with traumas and with disappointments and with betrayals that we may have experienced. And so we want to really take a look at the role that trust plays in our intimate relationships and in our authentic connections with ourselves and other people. Because trust is something that develops over time, and it can take a little longer for those of us who have experienced trauma in the past. And so this applies to developing trust in ourselves just as much as it applies to developing trust with others. And so we really want to take a look at that and see, like, how does trust show up in my life? Trust towards myself, trusting my instincts, trusting the outside world, trusting my relationships, my intimate relationships, and also being able to talk about that, because very often we don't talk about trust. We don't talk about when we don't trust someone. But it might be a good idea for us to talk about that with people that we feel safe enough to do that. Whether we talk about that to a therapist or a coach or a trusted friend, or even to our partner if we feel comfortable talking to them about that, right? Like a life partner. And hopefully there's enough trust between you and an intimate relationship where you're able to do that. Because if there isn't enough trust between you and an intimate relationship, a life partner, then that's certainly something that you want to look at. That's something that you need to learn to develop and work at with the other person. Now, the new moon trines Neptune in Pisces. And so that's good news, because what we get with this new moon is we're really getting sort of like a dose of that feminine energy, which is sort of receptive and allowing and nurturing and sort of like more of a flowy, compassionate energy. It can also be very intuitive. Sometimes it can be even psychic. And so with this, there is sort of like, we get a sense that we can more easily release and let go of certain fears or certain things that have maybe kept us protected or separate from other people. And we can really move more easily into an emotional fulfillment and empowerment within our relationships through that component of compassion and self-compassion, as well as being compassionate with other people. Now, Neptune will help us raise our vibration if we choose to use it in that way. Neptune allows us to tap into maybe some of the processes that Scorpio requires in terms of that transformation in a way that is a little bit easier. We can embrace our shadow issues a little bit easier because we're just more open. We're more in this place of allowing and accepting. And so, of course, what helps as well with the Neptune energies, if we really make use of the higher vibration of Neptune, which is connected to inspirational things, music, meditation, connecting with nature, connecting on an intuitive or emotional level with ourselves, with our higher selves, with our spiritual selves. And so we get a chance to bring awareness, light, and acceptance to any places in us that have felt closed off to the outside world, neglected or ignored. Right? So all that Scorpio stuff where we sometimes, where we're not able to fully trust and connect, this Neptune energy gives us the opportunity to be more in touch with these places inside of us. And so this gives us an opportunity to really tap more fully into our intuitive body and release old survival-based patterns. So that's the good news. Now then, there's another aspect that's sort of like an opportune aspect for this new moon, and it's connected to Pluto, which is actually the modern ruler of Scorpio. So the ruler of Scorpio is making an opportune aspect, the sextile, to the new moon in Scorpio. So that's sort of like a really powerful combination in a sense, because it gives us the opportunity to notice how obsessed have we become about manifesting something real in the outside world and achieving things or having success, and to let go of any fears connected to our long-term goals. And so it's an opportunity to move from sort of like a survival place to a more passionate engagement with life, especially out there in the world, and also with society, right? And how we belong within that society. And so perhaps surprisingly, empowering other people is really key in this. To really take advantage of this opportunity, we want to empower each other. And so ask yourself here with this sextile, is it at least possible that a trusting emotional connection with others might bring more authentic and passionate engagement to what I'm currently building in the long term or for the long term? So that's a long question. So let me repeat that again, and feel free to also read up on it in the weekly forecast. Is it at least possible that a trusting emotional connection with others might bring a more authentic and passionate engagement to what I'm building for the long term right now? And so it's just sort of like a question around possibility, right? Like, might this be possible, and what might that look like if we had relationships like that? And what action can I take to empower myself and others? What actions can I take to empower myself and others? And what roles do self-responsibility, realistic self-assessment, and healthy boundaries play in all of this? And the reason why this question is so important is because, Pluto is in Capricorn, and Capricorn answers to Saturn, which means that Saturn really has a very important placement in this new moon chart as well. And Saturn is all about self-responsibility. It's all about self-assessment. It's all about healthy boundaries. It's all about being real, being truthful about what we're capable of and what we're not capable of, our limitations as well, right? So what roles do self-responsibility, realistic self-assessment, and a healthy boundary play in all of this? And what might transform if I focused 5% more on what I actually have control over? And that's a really, really powerful question as well. And, the reason why I always say, 5% more is because we want to give it baby steps, right? Saturn is all about taking baby steps. It's not about making huge leaps forward. It's all about, taking it one step at a time and doing what works. So what might transform if I focused 5% more? And that's not that much, right? 5% more on what I actually have control over. And then look, that those 5%, might be 5% today. And then tomorrow, that 5% will be 5% more from the 5% you've given it today, right? So we can start to build on the 5% and make it each day another 5%. So what might transform if I focused 5% more on what I actually have control over? Because let's face it, a lot of us focus on the things that we don't have control over. And it really is so disempowering, and it causes so much pain and so much suffering in human beings when we focus on the things that we don't have control over. Now, the other planet that's also connected to this new moon chart is Mars, because Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio. Before Pluto got discovered, Mars was connected to Scorpio. So Mars is currently in Aquarius, which is also ruled by Saturn, traditionally speaking. So again, we sort of have like the Saturn component with this new moon chart. And Mars is making several connections within the new moon chart. It will be in a mutual reception to Uranus in Aries, which means that they're in each other's sign. Mars is in Aquarius. The modern ruler of Aquarius is Uranus. And then Aries is ruled by Mars. So they're in each other's sign, which means they support each other's agenda. So they have a really strong connection in this new moon chart. And Mars will also make a sextile to Uranus as well. So there's an opportune aspect and a mutual reception with Uranus. So that's quite powerful. And a trine to Venus in Libra. And Venus at the time of the new moon is still retrograde, but it's stationing to go direct. So it's already slowing down. It has more, it's more exalted in the sky. So we're really feeling that Venus in Libra strongly, and especially also because it's in its own sign. So what does all of this mean? So these aspects really provide an opportunity to bring a common vision and a human approach to our interactions with other people. So we're really, what we can ask ourselves for the next 28 days here is, what actions call to me today? How might those actions bring about a better future for myself and others? Could I go after what I want right now and keep other people's benefits in mind? And then what collaborations are being revisited and are waiting to move forward? And the reason why we're waiting to move forward with collaborations right now is because Venus is still retrograde. And so the moment she goes direct, November 16th, that gives us the opportunity to start moving certain collaborations forward. But in the meantime, until November 16th, what needs to be addressed within me before this can happen? So what about, values that we have, or what about self-value, or what about relationships, like things that we need to be open to around relationships? What about that needs to be addressed within this next week or 10 days before this can happen, before we can move forward with our collaborations? Now, this new moon also points to several other energy patterns that are not necessarily connected to the new moon itself or to the planets that rule the new moon, but they're important energy patterns that I want to mention real quick. So the first one is Jupiter in the last degree of Scorpio, which I mentioned a little bit already, making a quincunx to Uranus in Aries. And Uranus has just retrograded back into Aries only 21 hours before the new moon becomes exact. And so, as some of you already know, when a planet is in the last degree of a sign, this energy is more exalted. And so we know that there's shifts coming, right? Something is louder right now, something that sort of we need to take a look at. And you could say that the rumbling of this vibration is really kind of causing maybe a little bit sort of like could cause some anxiety, but it could also cause this sense of excitement. So an unexpected turn of events could leave us, feeling either uneasy or unsettled or hyperly excited about something. And, one of my favorite sayings here comes to mind, which is, correct and continue. Because whenever there's some unexpected things that happen in life, it's important to know that, yes, life can throw us curveballs sometimes, but that doesn't mean that we have to stop life or that we have to stop, what we're doing. We just take a look at the curveball, correct, and continue, and life actually is very much like that. Life is correct and continue because life is not a straight line. Life is a left and right and up and down and forward and backward. We do experience that in life all the time. So correct and continue is a really great, motto that you can think of and run with whenever you have, things happen in your life that sort of like throw you for a loop a little bit, right? And especially with this quincunx, there could be certain things could happen that might throw us a little bit, especially with Uranus being involved. And so at any rate, so we might detect that we feel nervous or anxious a little bit, and moving through our bodies, that could be something that we might be experiencing. And so staying as grounded as possible is definitely going to be helpful. And just keep breathing, keep breathing and just know it's all good. It's all just another curveball. It's fine. It doesn't mean that I have to get derailed. I'm just going to have to make adjustments, right? So remember, the future we are creating can only be fulfilling to the extent that we can embrace the present moment. Because when we're not able to embrace what's currently happening, how are we going to be able to create a future that's actually going to be meaningful and fulfilling to us? Now, feel free to read a little bit more about this aspect also in my weekly forecast on November 8th when the aspect becomes exact. And of course, for all my members, that's freely available. And if you're not a member yet, stay tuned until the end. I'll talk a little bit about that. Now, in the meantime, though, you can ask yourself, what if I allowed myself to feel the fear while staying connected to the vision? And that might be sometimes a challenging thing to do. But I think if you can ask yourself that question when something like that comes up, that in itself can be very powerful and can really help you in that moment. What if I allowed myself to feel the fear while staying connected to the vision that you have for yourself, right, down the line? So, and then another question you can ask, might an inner awareness of those two energies help me get more comfortable with being uncomfortable? And, with a quincunx, that's the thing with an aspect like that, especially a quincunx like this where it's Aries and Scorpio. It's very much about learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. We're in a phase where there's things happening that are not quite a match. They're not quite fitting with each other. Like when you have a puzzle and you have two puzzle pieces and they can't fit because they're from different puzzles. So no matter what you do, you can't make them fit. But you can just allow yourself to be with each puzzle piece and let it be what it is and not try to make it fit, right? And just get comfortable with it being uncomfortable, with it not being a fit. And then where do I need to go deeper if I'm to create the change I desire? Because Jupiter is still in Scorpio, in the last degree of Scorpio. So where do I need to go deeper and look deeper, take that magnifying glass and look, where is there still some stuff that I need to look at before I move on, before Jupiter moves into Sagittarius. And so I can create the change that I desire. and what requires my conscious awareness and acknowledgement before I'm ready to step onto my chosen path. And it takes, really being able to walk our own path, which Uranus in Aries very much recommends us to do. And it's something that we've sort of been already playing with and investigating, for the past 7 years, while Uranus was in Aries for a long time. In order for us to really walk our talk, we need to really be very conscious and acknowledge, what does that require for me to walk my own talk, to really be, the leader that I would like to be. And what if all is well all the time, even when there is discomfort and uncertainty? Because of course, uncertainty and discomfort brings up fear a lot of the time, and we don't like it, so we resist it or we try to push it away. But if we knew that even though there was discomfort and uncertainty, that all is going to be well eventually, then maybe we wouldn't be resisting it. Maybe we wouldn't be pushing it away. And that's very valuable. So what if all is well all the time, even when there is discomfort and uncertainty? And even when it lasts longer than I expected? And that's a very, very good question here, because of course, that's the tough part, right? If something lasts longer than we expect it to last, that can become very uncomfortable very quickly. And so the mind can support us though in this, right? Because if we think of it as, this is lasting exactly the amount of time that it needs to last, versus this is lasting too long. This shouldn't be lasting this long. You can see how one really brings more anxiety into our energy body, into our physical body even. And the other just brings more peace. So we really need to take a look at how our mind is supporting us in how we perceive uncertainty, how we perceive discomfort. And if I let myself be really flexible, how flexible could I be? Now, most of us have a certain level of flexibility, and very often we can't go beyond that. Right? Very often we're like, well, I can be flexible here or I can be flexible here, but I'm not going to be flexible here and I'm not going to be flexible here. So we have to kind of take a look at that and see if I let myself be really flexible in some of the areas where I have not been letting myself be flexible. Like, how flexible could I be? And again, it doesn't mean we have to, go from 0 to 100, but just see if we can stretch our flexibility just a tiny bit, especially in those areas where we haven't been able to be flexible in the past. And then what might taking a deep breath do for me right now? And I think that would be a fantastic question. You just keep asking, over the next 28 days. Just what might taking a deep breath do for me right now? Because a lot of time breathing is something that we stop doing when we get discomfort, when we have discomfort or when we feel this uncertainty. We stop breathing very often. So what might taking a deep breath do for me right now? Okay, and so then Jupiter, moves into its own sign, which is Sagittarius, only 20 and a half hours after the new moon becomes exact. So that's obviously going to be a big shift for this new moon cycle. And it will start its journey through this optimistic and adventurous, truth-seeking sign until December 2019. So for a little bit over 1 year. And so these next 28 days will be ripe with shifts and changes. So stay centered in the here and now and expect the unexpected and allow yourself to make inner shifts. And just remember that, any inner shifting paves the way for any outer shifting as well. And again, flexibility is key. It's really staying flexible. Now, we went over this upcoming shift with Jupiter in Sagittarius in more detail in our last forecasting forum. So if you want to know how Jupiter's journey through Sagittarius until 2019 impacts you personally, feel free to get my 110-minute long webinar on the subject. You can purchase that on my website. If you go to my services tab and just kind of hover over my services tab, then there will be a menu that will show up, and it will lead you to the webinar page, and you can click on that link for webinars, and you can find it there. Now, the fee for this webinar is still only $37, even though the webinar is way longer than my usual forecasting forums. And that's partly because we also cover the shift of the moon nodes as well, because the moon nodes are also shifting into Cancer and Capricorn until 2020. And at the time of the new moon, the moon nodes have already shifted because they're shifting the day before the new moon becomes exact. So as you can see, there's a lot happening right around the new moon. And if you want to check out a 20-minute excerpt of this webinar, before you buy it, just to be sure that this is something for you, feel free to do that on my website as well. If you go to astrology videos on my blog page, you'll be able to find the 20-minute excerpt from Jupiter in Sagittarius and the moon nodes in Cancer Capricorn. All right. And if you have difficulties finding it, just email me and I'll send you a link. Okay. Now, if you are already a star or superstar member, check your email for the link to the webinar, because that was already emailed to you at the very, very late evening of October 24th. Okay. So it should be in your inbox. And if you don't have it in your inbox and you can't find it, again, just email me at info@astrologercoach.com, and then I'll send it to you again. Now, for now, what I want you to do with Jupiter being in the last degree of Scorpio still at the time of the new moon, think back over the last year, October 2017 until November 2018, while Jupiter was journeying through Scorpio, and ask yourself, where did I gain a new perspective in promoting a deeper connection to myself? And what journey deepened my gaze into my psyche, into my unconscious? And did this 1-year transit through Scorpio transform some of my beliefs or fears, or the beliefs that I have about my fears, or about, my shadow or darker sides of myself? And what needs to end now for a renewed empowerment and passion to emerge? Because remember, Jupiter is in that last degree of Scorpio, and Scorpio is all about empowerment and passion. So in order for us to really take advantage of this last degree of Scorpio, what needs to end? What do we need to let go of so that we can really feel this renewed empowerment and passion that we want to feel, that we want to get connected to, so that we can feel that more within ourselves and in relationship to life? Now, if you have a birth chart and you know what to look for, look to see what houses are connected to the Scorpio energy. And if you like, you can also look to see what houses are connected to the Sagittarius energy as Jupiter is moving into Sagittarius. And if it sounds like I'm talking a foreign language here and you don't know what to do, feel free to watch my video on how to read your birth chart, which is available for free on my website right now. You can either get it on my homepage. If you scroll down to free class, there's like a tab that says free class, and if you click on that, you'll get to this course, to this class. You can also, of course, join my monthly forecasting forums at any point and ask questions there. The next one will be on November 27th at 1 p.m. New York time. So if you want to join that one and ask any questions there in relationship to the Jupiter movement, that's possible. And we will also cover in this next forum, we will cover Neptune, Chiron, and Mercury station direct phases that start in the late November, early December. And those will be connected to the Pisces and Sagittarius energy in our chart. So we'll definitely talk in more detail about that and what it all means and how we can support ourselves in moving forward with some of these energies. So if you want to join us there and get a more personal understanding of that, feel free to sign up. You can do that also on my homepage. Now, the second of the energy patterns that's connected to the new moon chart, and the last one that I will talk about, is the grand trine in water that takes place involving Jupiter in 29 degrees of Scorpio, the North Node in 29 degrees of Cancer, and Chiron in 28 degrees of Pisces. So as you can see, it's a very, very tight grand trine in the water signs. And this makes it easier for us to experience some healing around our inner wounded child and any traumas that we might have experienced in the past, or any kind of disempowerment that we might have experienced. And so we're quite able to receive the support that we need right now, because the feeling energy flows very nicely. And so we're really capable of getting to the bottom of our survival patterns right now, to see what they're about and how we can shift our perspective and how we can start to do more healing around them. And maybe to also focus more on self-care in order to get to those places. So what you can ask yourself is, what might be possible in this next cycle of our life? Especially, with the North Node being now in Cancer for the next 18 months. If I simply remained curious and explored any sensations or thoughts that arise. Could I acknowledge what comes up without needing to analyze or understand it? And could I give myself permission to tap into the spaciousness all around me as I continue to breathe slowly and deeply, perhaps even while feelings of fears or any other feelings for that matter show up? So that's a really, really big question. So let me say that one more time, because of course, as we're exploring, these sides of ourselves, the wounding in us, the traumas, the disempowerments, the survival stuff, could I acknowledge what comes up without needing to analyze or understand it? And this is very important, because feelings don't want to be analyzed. Feelings want to be felt. You can analyze thoughts, or you can analyze, problems, or you can analyze situations, but feelings want to be felt. So just so we can get a little bit more peace with our feeling body, we need to honor our feelings and we need to feel them, because the more we analyze them, the more we're actually rejecting our feelings, because it will create a separation between us and our feelings, and actually letting them be felt. It will separate us from that. So could I give myself permission to tap into the spaciousness all around me as I continue to breathe slowly and deeply, perhaps even while feelings of fear and any other feelings for that matter might show up? So that's very powerful, because of course most of us are not so comfortable with certain feelings. A lot of us have difficulties with our feeling body, let's face it, right? And for those of us who don't have any issues with our feeling body, you are the people that you want to guide and support and be compassionate towards other people that do, and really help people discover a way to connect to their feeling body in a healthy way. Now, seeking help from trusted support systems or healers during this time is definitely recommended, and again, it's probably also going to be easier to receive that support. So it will really help us to seek a place of healing when it comes to our insecurities with our feeling body, and any inner places of disconnect that we're feeling, whether that's with our higher power, whether that's with, our intuition, whether that's with, feeling disconnected from believing that we can actually have what we dream about in this lifetime or in this physical experience. Any kind of insecurities that might show up around that, we want to learn how to heal some of that. And healing happens through love and compassion and embracing and accepting. So for the next 28 days, ask yourself, what if I listened to my innermost self? The part of me that's very subtle, that's intuitive. What if I listened to that part of myself 5% more? Or as best as I can. And what might I learn if I focused 5% more on self-care? Because self-care can be really, really powerful key to really being able to tap more into our intuitiveness and into our feeling body in a healthy way. And this could be, that we nurture ourselves, that we treat ourselves with respect, that we have more of an understanding towards ourselves, that we love ourselves more, that we embrace our own limitations with kindness, and, basically doing anything that we would do for a dear friend, anything that we would do for someone that we truly, truly care about. And so how might that benefit other people as well if we did that? If we learned how to focus 5% more on self-care, how would that benefit other people? And again, I also recommend you watch my latest webinar for more insight when we talk about the moon nodes shifting into Cancer Capricorn, because the moon node in Cancer very much has to do with self-care and is where we're needing to focus for the next 18 months. So, again, feel free to watch that 20-minute excerpt that I have available on my website, or get the whole 110-minute webinar that's available as well. Now, to sum it all up for this new moon, we're definitely invited to contemplate the blessings of facing our fears and the beauty of letting go. And, we letting ourselves integrate all of who we are is very powerful with this new moon for the next 28 days. Even the parts that are connected to past trauma and pain, and maybe even especially the parts that are connected to trauma and past pain. If we can start to integrate those, that'd be really, really powerful. And so as best as you can, allow those parts to feel safe and loved. And remember, there's nothing to defend or protect. You are a spirit being in the human experience, and you are powerful. You are the creator of everything that you're doing. And so we have to remember that we're most connected to our inner power and our passion for life when we don't reject any parts of ourselves. And of course, first we need to know that we're doing it, right? So the consciousness around that needs to be there. And then once we're conscious, we need to learn how to be loving and kind to those parts of ourselves and integrate them in a healthy way. So even the things that we think are like ugly or ridiculous or shameful about ourselves, and again, probably more importantly, especially those parts of ourselves that we think are ugly, ridiculous, or shameful. These are the sides of ourselves that we definitely want to learn how to integrate and give love to and make peace with. So some last questions that you can ask yourself as best as you can. Could you acknowledge any resistance that you can detect towards yourself, towards others, towards life itself? And just for right now, could you simply let go of wanting to resist what is? That's a very powerful question. So, let me actually ask that question again for you so you can really tap into that more fully. Could you acknowledge any resistance that you can detect towards yourself? Any resistance that you can detect towards others? and any resistance that you can detect towards life itself. And just for right now, could you simply let go of wanting to resist what is? Just for right now. And then could you set all inattention free as best as you can, just for right now and just as an experiment in freedom? Could you set all inattention free as best as you can, just for right now and just as an experiment in freedom? And I think these are really powerful questions. So as you move through the next 28 days, I would say, really allow yourself to connect with these questions. Keep asking them, but keep asking them for real, like not in a conceptual way and not in an intellectual way, but actually, can you really check for yourself? Check, like keep actually checking in the present moment. What's there? And really use these questions. They're really powerful if you really do it. That can be very, very helpful. Now, flexibility and open-mindedness, I've already mentioned, of course, will definitely help us for the next 28 days. And embracing our humanity and practicing self-compassion is always a great advice and great suggestion as well, especially in regards to our inner processing that's currently going on and honoring our limitations. And all of that is an opportunity for healing. Honoring our limitations and our processes, our feeling processes, that's definitely an opportunity for healing. Now, if you have an ascendant or any personal planets in 13 to 17 degrees of Scorpio, Taurus, Leo, or Aquarius in your birth chart, then this new moon is definitely going to be affecting you more than other people. But even if you don't have those signs and degrees, even if you don't have planets or points in those signs and degrees in your birth chart, look at the house placement in your natal chart that is being affected by this new moon. So take a look. Where does 15 degrees of Scorpio land in your birth chart? Look for the Scorpio symbol. Look for 15 degrees is basically exactly the middle of Scorpio, because each sign has 30 degrees, so 15 degrees is always the middle between the beginning and the end of Scorpio, right? So look at the middle of Scorpio. Where does it land in your chart? And what area of life is most affected by this new moon for you personally? And again, if this is something that you can't do on your own, then feel free to watch my How to Read Your Birth Chart video that I mentioned earlier already, or join us for the monthly forecasting forums and ask your questions there. Now, before we talk about setting intentions, which of course is also something we want to do for this new moon, let me just very briefly mention my online community. If you've been thinking about joining, and getting access to the new moon questions, getting access to the full moon videos, getting access to the weekly forecast, I would highly recommend getting in now before the discounts end. Currently, the discounts are still between 40 and 60% off. So the lowest membership that you can enter is 40% off, and then 2 of the other memberships that are available are 60% off. So there are really some very, very good discounts right now. So I really want to encourage you to look at that for yourself and see if that might be something you're interested in. And these discounts are also locked in for life. So if you sign up now, you don't ever, even if my prices go up, your prices will not go up. So as long as you stay an active member, of course. And so there are 3 membership levels available. The universal membership, which is the most basic, that's 40% off. The star membership and the superstar membership, which are both 60% off. And so each one of them gives you access to free astrology content all months long. And each one, of course, has, more to offer. Each one is sort of like appropriate to it being, a little bit more expensive than the other one. It will also give you a lot more that you can have access to. So the star memberships, for example, include the monthly forecasting forums, and then the superstar memberships include monthly one-on-one coaching sessions with me and 1 free reading per year, and many, many other things. So, you do definitely get a lot for what you're paying for. So feel free to check out all the details on my website, either on the homepage or on the membership page. And yeah, just if you have any questions about anything at all, feel free to email me at info@astrologercoach.com and just ask away. And if you're already a member and you have questions about the membership site, or you have difficulties with anything at all, also please email us and let us know. We're always happy to help. Now, new moon intentions. Let's talk about those, because we definitely want to make sure we know when is the best and most potent time to set these intentions. So the intentions are best done soon after the new moon becomes exact, so definitely not before. And we also want to avoid moon void of course phases, because a moon void of course phase is a very creative, very sort of like, it's a time where things don't stick necessarily. So when we set an intention, we want it to stick. We want it to manifest, right? So that's why we don't necessarily want to do that during a moon void, of course. So this month, the best time to set intentions will be anytime between 11:02 a.m. on November 7th and 5:42 a.m. Very early morning on November 8th. And then again from 1:59 p.m., so almost 2 p.m. on November 8th until 11 a.m. on November 9th. And all of this is New York time, East Coast time in the US. If you live in a different time zone other than East Coast time, then feel free to join my Facebook fan page or my Twitter page and just pay attention to when I post, when is the best time to do, when I post these reminders for the best and most potent time to set intentions. And I will do so on November 7th, November 8th, and 9th. So you can stay tuned that way. Or you can also just, take a look at a time zone converter and see what time zone when it would be for you, if you plug in those time zones. Now, for more information about setting new moon intentions, if you have never done it before, go to my website and go to the blog page. And then look for astrology articles or a tag that says new moon intentions on the right hand side of the blog page. There will be all these different tags and different links to all these different pages, and one of them is astrology articles, the other one is new moon intentions, and just click on either one of them and you will find the article about setting new moon intentions. All right, so one last thing I want to mention is that I also have a free monthly newsletter for those of you who don't want to become members and want to stay in touch with what's going on with me in terms of, special offers or my new moon videos or any announcements that I have about courses or my business. That's something that you can definitely stay in touch with. If you send us an email to info@astrologercoach.com and just write newsletter in the subject line, or you can also sign up on my homepage. If you go to astrologercoach.com and just click on the homepage, there's a place where it says newsletter, and you just add your email there, and you will be connected. Now, if you have any general questions about the new moon or about astrology, you can always reach out to me. If you have any personal questions, that require of me to pull up your birth chart, I will ask you to either book a reading with me via my website, or you can also ask questions connected to what's coming up within the next 30 to 40 days if you join the monthly forecasting forum next time around, November 27th. So these are all the options there are. So, feel free to do whatever is in alignment with you. And my members will see me again in 2 weeks from now at the time of the full moon, or actually a week before the full moon. You will get my full moon video. So we can look at how far we've come since setting our new moon intentions and what has developed since then. And if you're not a member yet, then feel free to check out membership, or I'll be back in a month from now with the next new moon video. All right. Much love. This is Astrologer Coach Sonja Francis. Goodbye.